I readjusted my phone, and fortunately, I have a tilt steering wheel. Put it even lower. Great. Great. Readjusted my phone. Want to be a little more centered. Um, want to talk about reform and the necessity for reform, right? Reform is necessary. You kind of see a lot of it happening in the Western world constantly. And, what's interesting is there's a proper way to permit reform to exist. And that's kind of what I want to talk about is transformation and reform, right? The first is if you want to properly reform something, you need to make sure you educate yourself, right? You need to do the proper research and studying because you can't, this goes very closely with goals. You can't get from point A to point B if you don't know what point B is. You need to identify point B. It needs to be clearly identified, and it should also be identified as something better than point A, because why would you go from A to B if B isn't better than A? You'd stay in A, right? So reform is necessary, and we can call that transformation if you want. And reform needs to be something that is, it needs to be studied and thought about deliberately prior to making that change and that effort, because otherwise your point A and point B might not be the progression they should be, right? You may go from point A to point B and realize point B is actually worse, right? And so yes, it would still be reform, but it's really not reform, because reform should be several things. I jotted these down in my notes, right? It should be a renewal, a refreshment, and an improvement. A renewal, a refreshment, and improvement, right? Because you want to take the one and make it better. So if you go from A to B because you didn't do the work, and B is worse than A, then it's really not reform. You're actually just going backwards. So in order for it to be reform and good reform, it needs to be an improvement too, right? You need to take what you already have and build upon it and make it better. And that's why that study, that time of learning and making sure point A needs to be reformed is important, right? Because you don't just want to go from A to B and B is the same as A, or B is worse than A, right? And the same thing applies for transformation, right? It's the same thing, right? Reform, a lot of times when we speak of reform, it's on a societal or cultural or a level that includes a group of individuals, right? But reform can apply to yourself, which you would probably identify as transformation, because change is possible and change is necessary. The world is always changing around us. It's always changing, and that forces us to change with it. You could kind of consider it survival of the fittest. If you want to survive in the world, you need to change, you need to adapt, you need to be flexible. And so that transformation needs to happen. And it happens a lot, and we don't realize that, right? But when you can make it happen consciously, that's even better, right? And of course, the transformation you want to seek should be a renewal of your old self, an improvement of your old self, and a refreshing, excuse me, a refreshment of your old self. You're taking something in point A, your old self, your current self, and making it better, making it new again, making it, taking all the good qualities and really refocusing on them and improving them where you can as necessary, right? And that's a transformation, that's a renewal, and that's a change, right? People can change. People absolutely do change. And when you make it conscious, even better, right? Conscious change is the best change because that's where the best work happens. If you're changing unconsciously, a lot of times it's not good, right? You see that in childhood. You're constantly changing as a child, and most of it happens subconsciously. And then as an adult, you go, why do I have this problem? Why do I have this bad habit? Why do I see things so negatively? Why do people treat me this way? Why do I have no boundaries? That's because we were changing, but we were doing it subconsciously. And so other things were kind of writing our change for us. we were doing it partially, but we were doing it subconsciously. Our biology and our understanding and perspective of things on happening subconsciously was permitting us to change, but it was permitting exterior things to have influences where they shouldn't have influences, or it was creating beliefs internally where beliefs shouldn't be created. And of course, that's an example of change, but it's not a good example of change. It's a necessary example of change. You had to grow as a child. You had to learn how to find certainty and safety and security, and to take events and interpret them so you could survive as a child, right? But it was happening on a subconscious level. The real good change happens when it's on a conscious level. Again, that watching yourself as a hawk and learning yourself and studying the situation you want to change or transform or reform. Consciously aware, right? Fully present as you can be, fully aware and fully doing what you need to do to be able to allow that change to happen for the best, right? And when you do that, change occurs and it's good. It's good change if you're motivated by good motivations. I mean, you could have conscious change that's bad. I talked about in another episode understanding that capacity for good and evil within yourself. You have the capacity to change for evil too. But if you want to change for good, the first step is becoming conscious and understanding that you need that change happens. Change should happen consciously, and improvement needs to happen. There needs to be improvement for it to really be reform and transformation. Yeah. So don't fight against change. A lot of times the world does this for us, actually. The world will do a great job of saying, this is where you need to change. And so you'll be like, why does this person always treat me like crap? And the answer is, that's the world telling you this is an area of your life you need to consciously become aware of, pay attention to, understand, and change. Understand and permit to exist so that it can transform you into even better, so that no longer does that person bother you, right? No longer does that person treat you like someone you don't want to be treated like, right? Whatever the circumstance. Pick whatever bad thing you think keeps occurring in your reality and in your life, and realize that that is life motivating you towards change. It's saying, pay attention to this, become conscious of it. Just lost my train of thought. Become conscious of it and study it, understand it, watch it like a hawk, see your reactions to it, see what you should be acting towards it, understand your perspective and your beliefs associated with it, right? Study it. So see it, become conscious, study it, notice your body's responses, your emotional responses, your reactions, your beliefs associated with it, your perspectives. Notice whether or not you have control of it and where your control is, because you don't have control of others, but you have control of your attitude and yourself and your responses. So study it, and then let it exist. Let it permit it to exist in your life. Surrender to its existence so that you can use it as an opportunity to change, to become someone who's not affected by this situation. And now you've transformed yourself. You've reformed yourself into a renewed, refreshed, and improved version of yourself that is no longer affected by this problem, right? So the world has a great way of saying, it's time for you to change. Pay attention. It's time for you to change. Knock, knock. Pay attention. I'm talking to you. So, when you're experiencing those things, that's the world talking to you, right? But you can do this on your own. And honestly, I think you make your life a lot easier when you do it on your own. And when you say, where is it that I need to change? Where is it I need to become conscious of, look to improve, gain an understanding and a depth of the situation and then surrender to it and transform into a better version of myself. And so that's what reform is. That's what transformation is. And that's what the change that's always happening to everybody is, right? Just take control of that, right? Take the pen that you have and write your own story and take control of your life. Choose to control your life and choose the outcome by permitting improvement, by permitting renewal of yourself and improvement of yourself and transformation, and permitting change to happen so that you can live a better human experience and hopefully help others live a better human experience.